The higher we fly, the smaller we seem to those who cannot fly. It is important in life to not only have heroes but also anti-heroes. We know who we are not only by what we are obtaining but by what we are leaving behind. We have talked a lot about Nietzsche's ideal, but it is important to understand that Nietzsche also has a counter-ideal. This counter-ideology, or second path in opposition to the path of health and challenge, is the path of comfort, pleasure, and an easy life, that is, the path of the last man. This perspective of Nietzsche seems counterintuitive and strange at first glance, largely due to the strange Zarathustra packaging in which it comes wrapped. But fast forward to the 21st century, and modern psychology's acceptance of the mental health crisis suggests that there may be something not only in Nietzsche's warning about the last man but also in his solution in the Superman. These books are full of content without substance. They begin with the eponymous heroes through the descent of the mountain to share their wisdom with the Eastern world. The descent is not received with the fanfare and gratitude that the wise heroic might have expected. Instead, he is mocked and despised by the townspeople to whom he tries to share his message. Feeling the sting of this disdain, Zarathustra reflects to himself, and I quote, "There they are," he said to his heart. "There they laugh, they don't understand me. I'm not the mouth for those ears." And it is at this point that he decides to try a different tactic. Instead of reprimanding them and pushing them to what they could be, he goes in the opposite direction, saying, "Then let me address your pride. Let me tell you about the most despicable thing. That is the last man." From here, he embarks on his great warning about the trap of modern life. This warning fits well with his idea of the flock and with Kierkegaard's idea about the multitude. This trap has emerged with the rise of modernity and the great mass production of human potential. The trap that Nietzsche tries to warn us about is the temptation of an easy life. With the death of God, we find ourselves at a crossroads. The death of God is both a terrible curse as well as a potentially abundant blessing. Besides great danger, there is great potential. Nietzsche writes, "We philosophers and free spirits feel when we hear the news that the old God has died as if a new dawn were shining upon us. Our hearts overflow with gratitude, amazement, forebodings, expectation. Finally, the horizon seems free to us again, although it is not bright. Finally, our ships can venture again, venture to face any danger. All the audacity of the lover of knowledge is allowed again. The sea, our sea, has already opened again. But the reverse of this great potential is a great danger. In the language of the quote above, with the death of God, we have entered a liminal space. From this threshold, we can make both a utopia and a dystopia. Just as it is, the ground of our culture can still produce the imposing two heavens of human greatness, but it will not always be like this. I quote Nietzsche, "The time has come for man to set a goal. The time has come for man to plant the seed of his greatest hope. Understanding that his soil is still enough, but one day this soil will be poor and tamed, and no tall tree will be able to grow in it. The time comes when man will no longer shoot the arrow of his longing beyond man, and the string of his bow will have forgotten how to clearly vibrate." Nietzsche's preference is for the arrow that will go beyond man. But now, let's take an in-depth look at the alternative. The unifying theme of the last man's value system is comfort. Therefore, everything he does is for having an easy life. The last man does not want to try too hard. He never strays too far from the balance of comfort. As Nietzsche says in one of his best-known phrases regarding this, he no longer becomes poor or rich since, for him, both require too much effort. Entertainment is important, but the last man is careful so that the entertainment is not too distressing. This drive for comfort has even led to changes in where they live. I quote Nietzsche, "They have left the regions where it was difficult to live because one needs warmth. One still loves one's neighbor and rubs against him because one needs warmth. With this comes the pacification of the last man with intoxicants and small helpers within reason." I quote Nietzsche, "One has his little pleasure of the day and his little pleasure of the night, but one takes care of one's health. A little poison sometimes that makes the dreams pleasant, and of course, a lot of poison in the end for a pleasant death." This need for comfort manifests itself as a need for harmony in interpersonal relationships. It is still discussed, but they soon reconcile, otherwise, digestion could be spoiled. Socially, it is shown in the form of egalitarianism and democratic ideals. There is no shepherd and only one flock. Everyone wants the same thing, everyone is equal. Whoever feels different voluntarily commits himself to an asylum. In the past, everyone was crazy, say the most refined, and blink at the last man. Twice in Zarathustra's speech, they say, "We have invented happiness," and they blink. This blink in these quotes is repeated several times in this passage about the last man. It makes us think of a docile animal. So it seems that what Nietzsche wants us to think when it comes to the last man is of a flock of chickens. The impression that Nietzsche leaves us is that the last man is a docile and domesticated animal. This idea is reinforced by the phrase he uses about the soil in the passage we cited above. When the soil has lost its richness, it has become not simply poor but rather poor and domesticated. This theme of domestication is important. It fits with Nietzsche's contempt for the herd, which in turn is related to his idea of slave morality. Nietzsche does not want a humanity of herd animals for himself. These animals are prey animals, they are not the apex of life, but the scavengers are the forage that sustains the large birds of prey. They are necessary as a basis for the great, but they are far from being the objective in themselves. In The Gay Science, Nietzsche writes, morality is the herd instinct in the individual. In the genealogy of morality, he contrasts the lambs, that is, the incarnations of slave morality, with the birds of prey. For the lambs, the birds of prey are simply evil, but the birds of prey suffer no such moralistic scruples. So this distinction between predator and prey is another way of framing Nietzsche's idea of the Superman ideal and the counter-ideology of comfort. The idea of a life of comfort, where we work as much as we want to work, don't fight with our neighbor, and have small pleasures and an easy death, is the kind of life that we usually associate with utopia. This life has even become possible with the technological evolutions of modern times. In fact, this is the exact promise that modern society offers us. There is an expanding modern market that nurtures and exploits this dream that Nietzsche calls the last man. But there is every reason to believe that this dream would, in fact, be a nightmare. It would be the perfect fulfillment of Oscar Wilde's pithy epigram that, in this world, there are only two tragedies. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting it. In the century and a half since Zarathustra burst onto the scene, Nietzsche's perception of the nightmare of the last man has emerged from its depths to the surface of cultural consciousness. Aldous Huxley's novel Brave New World paints the picture of a society where pain has ceased to exist, where negative emotions are eliminated by the wonder drug soma, where life is comfortable, and everyone is happy. Our instinctive reaction to this image is one of wonder and hope. We think this must be a utopia. But in reality, it is anything but that. In the elimination of negative emotions, something fundamental of the human experience is lost. There is a scene in the book that gets to the core of this something missing. The protagonist of Brave New World is a savage named John who was raised in a tribe outside of the technological utopia. In this scene, John is brought before Mustafa Mond, the resident world controller of Western Europe, for starting a mutiny by trying to stop the distribution of the drug soma. Mond explains to John the workings of this utopian system and how it has made life comfortable and predictable. But I don't want comfort, answers John. I want God. I want poetry. I want real danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin. Indeed, said Mustafa, you are claiming the right to be unhappy. Without mentioning the right to grow old and become ugly and powerless. The right to have syphilis and cancer. The right to have very little to eat. The right to be dirty. The right to live in constant apprehension of what may happen tomorrow. The right to be tortured by indescribable pains of all kinds. There was a long silence. But John the Savage said finally, I claim them all. Mustafa shrugged his shoulders and responded, welcome to you. On the other side of the coin is the harsh reality of the mental health crisis. In his 2002 work, The Father of Positive Psychology, Martin Seligman, noted that over the last 40 years, in all the rich countries of the world, there has been a striking increase in depression. Depression is now 10 times more prevalent than it was in 1960 and affects a much younger age. The average age of the first episode of depression 40 years ago was 29, while today it is 14 years. This is a paradox, since all objective indicators of well-being, purchasing power, level of education, availability of music and nutrition, have gone up, while all indicators of subjective well-being have been declining. In the 2 decades since Seligman's work was published, the situation has gone from bad to much worse. So, although we do not want to be an immoral bird of prey with our fellow human beings, all this suggests that there is at least something in Nietzsche's warning about the last man to which we should pay close attention. Perhaps we want to learn to be a little wary of our longings for comfort. The desire for an easy life speaks of a weariness with life. We are exhausted, worn out, and we have lost our enthusiasm for heights. Instead of the challenge of climbing, we long for the rest of the valley. Instead of growth and truth, we want food. But as we would learn if we were ever cursed with the tragedy of being granted our wish, comfort is its own form of hell. It is interesting, this perspective of our German philosopher. It is inevitable that we live in a time where addictions and depression are at a peak. We increasingly feel more disconnected from ourselves. It is as if we lived in a great simulation controlled by screens, where we prefer to live a digital life than a real one. Since the beginning of humanity, we have struggled to stay safe as a species, which means that we have a tendency embedded in our psyche toward comfort and convenience. But we must understand, as Nietzsche says, that higher values are more important and significant than simply remaining in a perpetual state of comfort. Comfort is good. In fact, most human beings work to be comfortable and stay happy. The problem lies when this comfort becomes the ultimate goal of our existence. This would inevitably bring to reality Nietzsche's almost exact prediction about the last man. To finish, I quote Nietzsche, "The day will soon come when men will be so small that they will fit in a thimble." Remember to subscribe and hit the like button for more videos and to help us reach more people.